Good evening. My name is Nicole Bryant, and we'll get started. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm going to be speaking tonight about the application process for international applicants, specifically to the US and the UK. Before we get started, however, I'm just going to launch a poll to see what grade we have our families from. So I know that we opened the invitation up to our middle school families as well as senior school. Historically, this has been a senior school presentation, but I know that there is quite a bit of curiosity and interest in learning more about applying internationally. So we thought it would be great to open it up to our middle school families as well. So if you can let me know what grade your daughter is in, that would be very helpful to me. Great. So we do have a few middle school families. So hello to you. My name is Nicole Bryant. I'm the University Guidance Counselor. I work primarily with the senior school students in helping them in their university applications, both domestically and internationally. And to our senior school families, most likely we've had at least one conversation, whether at curriculum night or if your daughter is in grade 10 or 11, we've probably had quite a few conversations about course selection as well. So welcome to everyone. Tonight, we'll be focusing on applications that will go to the United States and the United Kingdom, although we do have students, including this year, applying internationally in other places, including Australia, New Zealand, the Netherlands, Korea, and Spain, which is all very exciting. But tonight's presentation will be focusing on those two geographic areas because that's where the majority of our international applications go. I will wrap up tonight's session as well. There's been an increased interest in direct entry medicine, specifically in the UK and Ireland. So it is an optional, probably about 5 to 7 minutes that I will speak to at the end of the presentation, just before we wrap up for the evening. So I'm glad that no matter which grade your daughter is in, that you're joining me this evening because applications to international schools is quite extensive and requires a partnership between families and the school. They're quite complex. They're not nearly as straightforward as they are for domestic applications. In early October, I hosted a Canadian university application webinar as well, focused primarily on our grade 11 and 12 families, but was open to other grade 9s and 10 families as well. But the international applications require a bit more forethought and a lot more planning, both academically as well as outside of the school. And there's also a lot of personal reflection that really needs to go into the application, not just in grade 12, but in grades 9, 10, and 11 as well. I want you to know that we support students fully throughout the process, beginning usually in grades 9 and 10. Conversations do start with university guidance in grade 8 when students are selecting courses and coming into the senior school, so in grade 9. Students who know that they are interested in applying internationally can have those conversations in middle school as well. But usually the bulk of our conversations really start in end of grade 9 and into grade 10. Students can come to this decision a little later, and that's okay. It just may mean that there's a bit more work that needs to be done, especially as a student is in their grade 11 year. Understanding that this is a serious time commitment, students in grade 12 do have grad seminar to help support them in the Canadian application process. However, international applications, because of not just the writing, so the actual application structure, it's not just about that, but also all of the additional work that needs to be done to ensure that you have content to write about and things that you can include as far as your activities go. That really takes quite a bit of time and takes a bit of, as I said, advanced planning, especially in your grade 10 and grade 11 year. If we talk about the three systems for a moment. I think it's really good to get perspective as it compares to our domestic or Canadian applications. When you're applying to Canadian schools, there's only 22 universities in Ontario, and then a couple handful of schools that students typically apply to outside of the province. There's quite a larger number of institutions, especially in the US. There are thousands of undergraduate colleges. There's universities that have focuses on research, focus on liberal arts. There's a lot more being offered as far as private institutions, public institutions, state schools. In the UK, they are still very plentiful, but you're a little more limited in what you can actually apply to. So when you consider Canadian schools, you can apply with quite a bit of breadth, knowing that you can apply to one school with three very different program intentions, which is quite different from the UK and from the US. So our preparation for Canadian schools really is focused in grades 11 and 12. As I mentioned, we have grad seminar to help support students' applications to domestic schools, and that's built into their timetable as a grade 12 student. And really what universities are going to be focusing on, some may look at some extracurriculars, may require some supplements and that they're required to write essays, but the majority is going to be focused on completed grade 11 and 12 marks with a heavier emphasis on their grade 12 marks. Marks will be submitted as far as the full year model that we are now in. They are submitted in November as a progress report if the student chooses to have them submitted to OUAC, which is the Ontario University Application Centre, or as an official midterm in January. The UK, however, they do look primarily at your grade 11 and 12 marks, but there may be some additional pieces such as standardized testing that may be required or may benefit the student. When we're looking at the academic profile for the US, it's quite a bit different. Students actually must submit a full transcript. That is a part of the school report that's submitted on behalf of the student from my office. And that is going to include everything that is at the grade 9 level up to the point of application. So for our MS8 students and their families who are in attendance, your integrated arts, for example, that is a grade 9 level credit that will appear on your transcript. And if you are taking the grade 9 math as a reach ahead option, that will also appear on your transcript. I just want to make a note that as much as all grades do matter, at the high school level for US applications. Of course, if a student starts out, not as impressive academically in grades 9 or grade 10, but makes an upward trajectory and is a bit more competitive in their grade 11 and 12 years, that's perfectly fine. So a student doesn't have to necessarily start off very academic. It can be a slow progression as well, albeit universities do like to see consistent high achievement across all grades. So what's really a big differentiator for Canadian and UK is they're heavily focused on your grade 11 and 12 marks and understanding the academic rigor, particularly of your grade 12. The US is going to see all of your transcript beginning at the grade 9 level. For the most part, all degrees at each of these institutions is going to be 4 years with the exception of England. What's really neat about English schools is that you do your undergraduate degree in 3 years and may have the option to add on a 1-year master's degree. So you can actually be getting a bachelor's and a master's the same time as what you'd be getting an undergraduate here or in the US. And then the other big differentiator that I will be focusing on tonight is how are students assessed within the admissions procedure and their application. How do we curate it so it's best read in the context of that particular application? So in Canada, as I said, you can apply to multiple programs at a given university. So just as an example, the University of Toronto, you could apply to Rotman Commerce, apply to their kinesiology program, and also apply to architecture and receive offers of admission from all three of those institutions. In the UK, it's quite different. You can only apply to up to 5 institutions or 5 programs, and they really need to be in the same course of study. The UK calls programs courses. So that would mean that a student couldn't apply to 3 different programs, but really need to focus in on a specific course of study. So a student could study architecture and would therefore be putting forward an application to 5 different institutions for architecture. They wouldn't necessarily be able to apply to things outside of that because of the way in which their application will be read. The US, however, is really focused on your fit for the institution. So when we are looking at developing a student's application, we're really trying to identify the characteristics of an institution, of a university or college that a student would be able to showcase on their application. A student will be evaluated in the context of the program to which they are applying, but they are really institutionally looking for the fit of how a student is going to be contributing to the school culture as a whole. So when a student is applying, they're actually applying to the school, that college or university, and then they're taking into consideration as well the program to which the student is applying to. Okay. So we're going to start off by talking a bit about studying in the UK. And this does include, so this is England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland as well. And that is through one particular application called UCAS. It's important to note that given that a student is only applying to one course of study, they really have to be confident in that choice to study in that particular subject area. So I always say that the student who's best suited for study in the UK knows what they want to study and is really committed to studying that for 3 or 4 years. Unlike in Canada or even in the United States, elective options are going to be extremely limited. They really won't be able to study much outside of that course of study. And this is why in the UK, you're able to explore direct entry options because you're really focusing in, honing in on that subject that you wish to study. You're not going to necessarily have breadth requirements the way you would in the US, nor would you necessarily be able to take courses outside of your subject that you would be interested in learning more about. As I noted, a lot of these courses are 3 years in duration because you're really starting from day one to really focus in on that subject area, whether that be in classics. You wouldn't necessarily be applying into arts the way you would here in Canada and then declaring your major at the end of first year. You're really declaring your major not just at the time of matriculation, but at the time of application. Because of the way their application works, you're really demonstrating that aptitude and that strength in that course of study. And the institution is therefore evaluating you in regards to whether you are suitable for that course of study. Given that the tutorial system in the UK is quite a bit different than quite a bit of the massive lectures that we have here in Canada. There's a lot more of one-on-one work that students get to have in the UK, and there's a lot more of independent work as well. There's engagement in seminar study and often modules, which are shorter versions of semesters. So students may not necessarily be studying in 2 major semester blocks, but maybe studying in 3 or 4 modules instead. It's important to note that even in some of our engineering or STEM related fields, students would still be engaging in research and would often be writing a thesis paper in their 3rd or their 4th year, dependent on where they're studying. It's really important that students also understand that it's quite a bit different in the UK culturally than it is in Canada. A lot of students think that because our language is the same, that studying in the UK is quite similar to studying in Canada, but it's quite a bit different. And I always say that the geographic difference can also, distance can also feel quite It's a fair distance. It's a long plane ride to be studying over in the UK. So I always say that before you accept an offer of admission to the UK, to really make sure that you go to visit not just the campus that you'll be studying at, but also to visit London or any Edinburgh, any of the cities that you'll be nearby, to make sure that's the right fit for you. This is the case for any institution, but especially when you're looking to travel abroad, I think it's really quite important. In talking about some of the specifics of the application, students apply to UK institutions through UCAS. This is also where students can find more information about courses of study, is through ucas.com. Students will submit an application that will include some demographic information. They will self-report their grades. That's something that I help them. I sit down with the students and ensure that they are done correctly. And then they also submit a personal statement. So there's three major components. Their academic information, which will include, again, only those grade 11 and 12 marks, as well as any standardized test scores, whether they're required, such as the LNAT or the UCAT for some of those direct entry programs, or if a student has written any APs or has written any standardized tests such as an ACT or an SAT. That's a part of their academic profile. And a key component of that is that the universities will evaluate their academics with a microscope leaning towards the subjects you're intending to study. So if a student is looking to matriculate to study engineering, then a university is going to be paying much closer attention to those maths and sciences than some of the other perhaps humanities or languages courses that you may be taking as a grade 12 as an elective. A student writing their personal statement, it's about 6,000 character or 4,000 characters. So it's not a great deal of writing, but enough to show them that you are ready for this very focused course of study. So what universities are typically looking for are supercurriculars, and those are not just extracurriculars, although those, if they're relevant to skills that may be applicable to what you are applying to. But supercurriculars are things that show that you have gone above and beyond the classroom to explore something that you are thoroughly interested in. That can include pre-college programs at universities. That can include self-directed reading or self-directed research. It can include extended learning that you have done with a teacher, but it really shows that you are not just ready academically, because that's where they're going to be evaluating that academic profile, but you've really extended that beyond the classroom in a really meaningful way. And so therefore, sometimes our planning for a UK application really does begin close to the end of grade 9 and into grade 10, because we need to start utilizing your time outside of the school and especially summer programming. The last component is a counselor reference. So this is something that comes from me on behalf of the school. And what I write about suitability for that course of study from the school's lens. So I gather information from teachers and interview the student to really understand the ways in which they have investigated this course of study and talk about that aptitude and that strength. The student will compile the academic pieces as their personal statement. That is then sent onward to UCAS, and then I add the counselor letter, and then that's sent onward to the universities. Generally speaking, the deadline for UK schools is a little bit later, much like our Canadian applications, later in January. However, for students who are applying to direct entry medicine, direct entry veterinary science, those are due October 15th, as are applications to Oxford or Cambridge. And speaking of which, Oxbridge, or applying to Oxford or Cambridge, these are two institutions that are globally recognized, incredibly popular. And these schools do not permit students to apply to both institutions, but you actually can only apply to one or the other. Applications are due earlier, much like direct entry medicine. And the reason for that is there may be additional standardized testing that may be required. And those are typically around November 1st. So a student will gather their application, put it all together for an October 15th submission, and then write an admissions test around November 1st. If you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you also undergo an interview. So they review your application, they review your admissions test, and then if you are shortlisted, you are invited to an interview, which we do help students prepare for those interviews at the school. Interviews for Oxbridge begin in December and end in January. So if a student has not received an offer to interview by end of January, usually we say that door has most likely closed. It's important to note that a student who's applying to Oxford or Cambridge is not actually applying to Oxford or Cambridge, but to a college within the institution. So a part of the conversation that starts really in early grade 11 is which college the student would be looking to apply to, because not all colleges do offer the course of study that a student may be interested in. So a student is applying to a college at the institution, and that is where not just they will live, but also where their tutors or their professors will also be teaching them as well. Advanced placement exams, I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's important to note that for Oxbridge, any AP exams taken in grade 9 or 10, so this means that a student would have self-studied for these exams, they will be reviewed, but Oxford and Cambridge expects that if you are applying to one of their institutions, that your academic rigor is going to primarily be focused in your grades 11 and 12 years. So this means that typically an application to Oxbridge will include 5 APs at a level 5, and the highest you can get as a score is 5. So a student who has written APs in grade 9 or 10 can certainly submit them, but the expectation, and this is in conversation with me as well, is that over grade 11 and 12, you will be taking at least 5 APs, and the expectation typically is that you will achieve 5s on those. It's important to note that offers of admission from Oxford or Cambridge can be contingent on AP results that you get in grade 12. So it is not just about the work that you have done. They really want to see you follow through all the way through to July after you've graduated to ensure that you can handle the academic rigor of their program. And the reason why they would be leaning so heavily on AP scores is because we do not have A levels the way that the UK schools do. So this is their ability to understand how you can handle the academic rigor of their program, specifically as a junior and senior. Direct entry programs in law, medicine, dentistry, veterinary medicine are popular choices now for students who know absolutely that they want to study in a particular subject area. These conversations are important with me because of the sometimes challenging pathway in which it can be to return to North America. In some cases, dentistry, I would say in particular, can be a little bit more challenging, more so than medicine and veterinary medicine. And because law, you're studying British law, the ability to come back to study in Canada or practice in Canada is quite a bit more challenging. So students who know that they really not only want to study a particular course of study, but also know that they most likely want to stay in the UK, direct entry medicine is a really good pathway for them. Medicine, there are ways to come back to be a practicing physician in North America, and we certainly provide students with that information in advance of applications and throughout the application process as well, and while they're making their decision of whether or not they're going to stay in Canada or matriculate overseas. So this is a typical timeline for a student who's looking to apply to the UK. As you note, grade 9 really focus on ensuring your academics. You're developing a love of learning and a love of learning in a subject area you're interested in, and also allows you to really reflect on what you're really liking, where you're at, and where you might want to go. In between grades 9 and 10, I always say students should still, get to have a little bit of fun, but it's good to start thinking a little bit about academic planning and strategically what would be best for an application, especially when we start looking so heavily into super curriculars, which are really quite important in your grade 10 year. So students really need to start developing that understanding of what they might want to explore outside of the classroom in their grade 10 year, and then implementing that in some sort of summer program or summer initiative in between their grades 10 and 11 year. The bulk of our work together is really in grade 11. We're understanding what program or course of study you're really going to be focusing on. We're really developing an understanding of how that's going to be connected to the school, so that's something that I can certainly highlight in my counselor letter. And really making sure that we understand what schools would also be the best fit for you. It's important that we identify what prerequisites might be required for programs or what strategically might be best for an application in regards to your courses for your grade 12 year. So by the time a student is leaving grade 11 and heading into the summer, we've not only planned out their summer as far as programming goes, or perhaps standardized testing if a student is applying for a program that requires the UCAT, for example, which is direct entry medicine. We have a planned date for when the student is going to be writing that. And students are typically starting to work on their personal statement in the summer based on a large questionnaire that I provide the students, and a collaborative Google folder that we work on throughout the summer as well. Studying in the US is quite different than the UK, primarily because of its holistic admissions process. And therefore, when we're looking at the UK, there's so much that's focused on a student's academics and driving them towards a particular course of study. It's quite the opposite for the US. Because of a student's evaluation in the context of both the school from which they're coming and also the school to which they are applying, it really becomes much more than just about academics. And it can feel for some a bit more subjective as a result, because the variables, there's a lot of different variables. So what I want to reiterate about the US is that there really isn't a checklist or something that can identify exactly what a student needs to do in order to obtain an offer of admission. It's really about beginning from where the student is, amplifying their interests, and really finding a way to push where they're at right now further and extending them, rather than thinking about what are the things that I need to have to showcase on an application. Of course, strategically, there are things that I talk about with students that are important to have, but it's not about looking at what they should be doing and trying to mold them into that, but rather really identifying where they are now and finding the story, the narrative that we can tell. Admissions officers will often say that they will have multiple applicants who academically would be great fits for their institution, but a student was just able to tell their story a bit more. They were able to understand who they were a bit more clearly in the application. So therefore, it's really a partnership between the student and myself to really understand what's the story that we're telling in this application. The US system is quite different, not just from the UK, but from Canada as well. Oftentimes, students and families get a bit confused when I talk about colleges or refer to a certain college. It's quite different than the college system that we know here in Canada. If you identify a college here in Canada, that's more commonly known as a community college in the United States. A college in the US is smaller, usually college, smaller school that focuses on the undergraduate experience. They could be as small as 1,000 students and can range as being a smaller school on a larger campus, or can be in and of itself on its own campus in a rural area, in a suburban area, in an urban area. It quite varies. Universities are going to be more typical of what you think in a university like University of Toronto or McMaster is going to be, where these are institutions that not only have undergraduate education, but also professional master's degrees as well. So oftentimes US schools will also distinguish themselves as research or non-research institutions. Some schools will require have core curriculum, meaning that they dictate some of the courses that the students will have to take, or they could be an open curriculum like Brown University, where a student can take absolutely anything that they would like, and they're really sort of curating their experience under their program and degree. So it really varies from institution to institution as to whether or not they're going to require certain courses or breadth requirements, or even Dartmouth College has a swim test as a part of their graduation requirements. It really does vary from institution to institution. And this is why understanding what the university is really like and what the fit for that institution is so important, because the university is going to be evaluating the student in the context of, is this student going to be the right fit for us? So therefore, it's really quite critical that a student and I work together to understand if that would be a good fit for them as well. Students will say that they have a list of schools, and often they're very familiar names, but they're very different experiences when you're on those campuses, whether that be academically or socially. And so therefore, I really say to the students that more so than in Canada even, understanding the fit for institution for university is critical. Not just to make sure you're happy when you're there at that university, but really to make sure that that application reads as well as it could. I always say that the cost of an education in the US is usually quite a bit different than Canada, and can be a limiting factor for some families. In some cases, it's upwards of $100,000 Canadian. Once you factor in exchange and room and board and tuition and the like. There is a note I'd like to make about merit scholarships. So most of our students do receive merit scholarships. So there is a reduction off of the sticker price, but it again varies by the university and whether or not they offer scholarships to international students. Some schools, just as a note, public schools, state schools, so like UC schools, the University of California schools, do not offer international scholarships or aid. So therefore, students are having to pay full tuition costs as well. The research process is quite extensive for the US because there are so many universities. It's really good for students and I to start establishing what they're looking for in an institution, and sometimes that can also be dependent on where they want to study in the country. So some may want to stay closer to home and be in the northeastern US. I've had students say that they don't want to see snow ever again, and therefore have their search primarily, in the South and California and Florida. So that's a good starting point. And then what often happens is that I will send students suggested universities for further exploration. There are other resources that I recommend, not just me sending along information, but other resources to help extend their search. And the search you will usually start in end of grade 10, beginning of grade 11. It can certainly begin earlier, but that's sort of the time at which we want to make sure that we at least start generating that list, so that by the end of grade 11, we have a curated list of schools that we know we wish to apply to because of the admissions cycle for the US is quite different. And I'll be speaking to that in just a moment. But that means that by the end of grade 11, we should have a fairly good idea of what 5, 6, 7 schools are on your list or top of your list at that moment. And then also what schools, if any, we're intending to apply early. When we consider the whole student application, as you can see, there's quite a few additional components that are considered. So I always say Think of a US application like a collage or a painting, something that you step back and you look at as a whole while you also evaluate each individual component. There's a lot of variables that can really affect a student's or affect admissions any given year. It can be generally what a university is looking for in that given year, something that they are missing from their band or a specific team or what have you. They may be looking for that, and that may affect admissions. So it's really important to understand that it's sort of, there's a lot of a bit of subjectivity and a lot of variables. The first thing we want to just talk about is academic records. Like I said, all students must submit grades 9 through 12 completed courses. So at the time of an admission or of an application, if it's an early application, universities will only see up to completed courses at the end of grade 11. At this time in the year, I do have November progress reports that I do send onward to each individual school to which a student has applied if they're applying in the early round. For regular decision students, part of their application is not just those final grades up till the end of grade 11, but also midterm grades of their grade 12 year. Part of that academic record is your standardized tests now. I will talk about that in a bit. Standardized tests are optional for the majority of institutions at the present time. However, there was only two schools for the recent September 2024 admission cycle that required SAT or ACT, and that number has grown to over a dozen. So I have always recommended that students do look to submit a standardized test score, so an SAT or an ACT, and that is taken in conjunction with the student's transcript. So if a student has really strong scores on their transcript, a strong standardized test is then going to validate that. And if a student does struggle with a few courses, or perhaps their academics are not reflective of their full capability, or a student feels like it's not reflective of their ability, then a strong standardized test score can certainly help with that as well. In addition to academics, students have letters of recommendation. There are 3 that are typically submitted, 2 from teachers, although in some cases only 1 may be required, but the majority will allow 2 to be submitted. So therefore we take advantage of that. And then also a counselor letter of recommendation, and that's also part of the school report and the school profile. Something of note is that the counselor letter of recommendation, I always write that last, because by that point, I have seen the student's application, every component, the school-specific essays, the Common App essay, the teacher letter of recommendation, all of the standardized testing, any academics, and I can really make sure that the student narrative is told not just through the other pieces, but also tied up nicely in my counselor letter as well. This is why it's really important that I'm getting to know students beginning in MS8 as they're making their course selection coming into grade 9, and then meeting with students regularly in grades 9, 10, and 11, so that when it comes time to be writing that counselor letter, I've really gotten to know them and can really write a more fulsome academic recommendation for them. One part of the common application that students sometimes forget about is the activity section. So this is where they can include extracurriculars, professional internship that they will be completing in grade 11, things that they have done outside of the school that don't fit under awards. There are 10 opportunities, so there's 10 spaces for students to be noting activities, and I really recommend that students take advantage of all 10. And it's not just about describing what it is that they've done in that extracurricular or that activity, it's about talking about their impact. So being a part of our Global Citizenship Committee, for example, is great. But in what ways have they been an effective leader, or have they brought forward an initiative that has then created a whole school initiative? It's really about understanding the impact and how that their energy, their leadership has been felt in the school as well. And that's something that I certainly talk about in my counselor letters as well. So it's not just about joining a variety of different clubs. And in fact, while breadth used to be considered a real positive in previous years, universities in the US don't want to see that you've done everything. They want to see that you've put the time and effort and energy into the things that you truly want to be committed to and the things that you really absolutely love. And that will come through far more authentically in an application when it's something that you've really enjoyed and you've really loved versus things that you've done just to satisfy an application. So in addition to the academics, the letters, activities, we also have essays. Now, there will be one major essay that the students will typically write as part of the Common Application, and that is a personal essay. The Common App does give the prompts, but usually I say, consider what we want to talk about, what we want to tell them about. Again, that's a part of the preparation before a student goes into the summer in between grades 11 and 12. But what's a story that we want to tell them? What's something that we want to make sure that they know? And then university specific applications will often also have essays such as why this program, why this school, how will you be a contributing member of our community, or other more interesting niche questions like tell us about some of the content that you've recently ingested over the past year, podcasts, books, videos, things of that sort, or write a letter to a future roommate. Each university will not just have that personal essay from the Common App, but usually will have other school-specific essays. They could be anywhere between 200 to 650 words and can range from one essay to 6 or 7, again, depending on the school. And then in some cases, an interview. A lot of schools, it used to be that we would do a lot of alumni interviews. With the pandemic, a lot of universities have gone away from that because they were not using them for admissions. But there may be opportunities for students to submit an introductory video where they get to speak and record themselves and include that as part of their application. They may also include a resume, a portfolio of artwork, even if they're not applying to art schools or art programs. So there's often opportunities for students to tell more than just what the basic components of an application, that story, what that would tell, but tell them much more about themselves and really give them a glimpse into who they are and their personality. It's really important to note that it's not just about academics, albeit that's going to be a baseline for a lot of schools. A lot of schools are going to expect that students will have achieved a particular academic rigor in their school and have a particular academic record. And in addition to that, are doing other things that are felt within their community, felt within their school. And this also ensures that those letters of recommendation from our teachers are telling a more holistic story, not just about their academic ability, but also who they are as a person. So I always tell students that these references will not just be talking about what grades you're getting, but they'll be talking about how you contribute to the classroom community. Are you a collaborator? Are you really good at problem solving? Are you able to work through problems or overcome adversity or challenges that you may have? And how do you do that? Typically, our references, just as a note, are coming from grade 11 and 12 teachers. Teachers can have taught the student in grade 9 or 10, but they need to have also taught the student in at least one subject in grade 11 and or grade 12 as well. Unlike in Canada, where there is rolling admissions and really there's one deadline by which students must apply, albeit our students at our school usually apply much earlier than the January 15th deadline. The US application process has a bit more structure to it in that they're not just requiring students to apply by a particular date, but they also adhere to deadlines by which they inform students whether they have been successful in that application or not. Most commonly, students are applying to schools that are on the common application. Although there is the coalition application, I have not had anyone from SMLS use the coalition application just yet. Students have focused on common application schools, as well as schools such as that would utilize the Apply to Texas or UC schools, or even New York State. If a student is looking to apply in early decision or early action or single choice restrictive early action, generally speaking, the deadline for that application is November 1st. For regular decision, the application deadline, again, generally speaking, is going to be January 1st. So why would a student apply early versus regular? A student who feels ready for the application, feels that their application will be at its strongest by November 1st, are encouraged to consider an early decision and or early action school. Not all schools are going to have both early action and early decision. In fact, most Ivies are going to be early decision, and or they will be single choice restrictive early action. So what does that mean? If a student applies on November 1st to an early decision school, they will typically hear the success of their application or deferral or rejection in mid-December. So if a student applies November 1st and they are admitted in December, and they are admitted via early decision, they must withdraw all other applications because they are expected to attend the school. By applying early decision, a student knows absolutely that they want to attend that school and have every intention of matriculating to that school should they be accepted. So it is a committed application, and there's actually a form that must be signed by parents, by the student, and by myself, confirming that the student and the family understands that they are obligated to attend the school should the student be admitted. Early action, on the other hand, also has a November 1st deadline, will also inform students of the success of their application in December. However, there is no obligation to attend should the student be admitted. And the student also has until May 1st to make a decision as to whether or not they would like to accept an offer of admission. So a student who applies early action only, as well as regular decision, can wait until they have all of their offers in April and then make a decision at that time. It just means that they had the opportunity to be admitted earlier in the early action round. It is common for students to be deferred if they're early decision or early action. And what that means is that they aren't a no, but they are not a yes. And a deferral means that they are then put into the regular decision pool, which is quite a bit larger as well, and won't hear about a yes or a no until the end of March or beginning of April. So regular decision is exactly what that is January 1st. You apply during the regular round. It is going to be a larger pool of applicants as well, because it's when the majority of students are applying, but also you can apply to more regular decision schools. Early decision, you can only apply to one early decision school. Restrictive early action, you can only apply to one EA school. But if a school is only EA, then you can apply to multiple early action schools as well. So for our students at SMLS, the majority are going to apply, whether it's early decision or early action, with some applying regular decision because they still want to have the option to be applying to their Canadian schools as well and don't feel the need to be applying early as well. Some systems do have different deadlines, and some programs may have a bit of a different deadline as well. So for example, students who are applying to film or music at the University of Southern California, those deadlines do come for December 1st, even if you're applying regular decision, which would be January 1st. We have a lot of students who are starting to apply to University of California schools. Last year, we had 2 students attend UCLA and 1 in UC San Diego. So UC schools are becoming more and more popular. The UC system is a separate application. It is not on the common application. You can apply to all 9 of their campuses through one application. And the application deadline is typically November 30th, but this year, because November 30th is on a weekend, they have pushed that to December 2nd. So deadlines can vary, but generally speaking, the earliest a student would be required to submit an application is November 1st for any of those early applications, and then regular decision, generally speaking, is going to be around January 1st. Hot topic is around standardized testing. Even though a number of institutions went test optional during the pandemic because many students weren't able to access ACT or SAT testing, even in their country, universities did decide to go test optional as a to test the waters of whether or not they felt standardized testing was really necessary to validate success at the post-secondary level. Standardized testing had come under fire for many years, starting in about 2006, 2007. A lot of families and a number of people applying to university weren't really feeling as though standardized testing was equitable or that it was necessary. So over the course of the pandemic, universities and colleges really had the chance to evaluate whether standardized testing was valuable, not just in admissions, but also ensuring students were best prepared for their academic study. So many universities, many colleges are starting to reinstate standardized testing as part of admissions. As part of my counseling practice, I have always recommended that students do take a standardized test, and have found that students who did take an SAT or an ACT found greater success in the admissions process as well, because the test is standardized. It allows the university's admissions representatives to really understand what a student's academic ability is like. Students can write more than once. It is common for students to write, I would say, twice at SMLS, and historically, I encourage students to be writing in grade 11, sometimes in your first sitting in December. It can be a bit earlier if you are prepared, and then in March as well. Students who start in March, that's perfectly fine as well, will most commonly also write in the summer before grade 12 or at the very start of their grade 12 year as well. Many institutions are still test optional, and they have absolutely said that they are truly optional, that they will not penalize a student who does not have a standardized test. Again, the reason I really encourage students to take a standardized test is it ensures that it validates their academic record. There are institutions, so for example, those University of California schools are test blind or will not permit students to submit standardized testing. So there are some institutions that will not accept standardized tests, but I would say the majority will accept them if a student does present them. With a growing number of institutions, like I said, we started with 2 for our current September 2024 students. For September 2025, that number is about 12, and mostly are bigger name universities as well. I anticipate that number will continue to grow for September 2026 admissions and beyond. I'd like to just note that we do offer preparation for standardized testing. Specifically, we run the PSAT 8-9 and the PSAT NMSQT. So the 8-9 is for our students who are in MS8 and SS9, and the PSAT and NMSQT, primarily we really want grade 11s to be writing that, but we do permit grade 10s as well. We will be offering mock digital SAT experiences most likely in the spring, and then also a mock ACT so that students can get a feel for which of the two tests will be for them. I used to really encourage students to consider the ACT. However, when the digital SAT came out 2 years ago, it's much shorter and allows students to really be a bit more strategic in their testing. And the feedback that I've received from students writing the digital SAT has been very positive. It is a standardized test, so I don't think anyone likes to write a standardized test, but if they had to pick the two, the digital SAT does tend to be the one which is favored. It's important to note that universities do not care which standardized test you take. I have had students who are submitting even this year the ACT and some who are submitting SAT. The one thing I will note about the ACT is that as much as it's a bit more challenging, it's longer. It has 4 sections, whereas the SAT only has 2. I have had the feedback that students have felt that the ACT was easier to improve upon because they understood how to improve the content versus the SAT, which felt a little trickier as well. Students really should begin preparing for standardized testing in grade 10. Doesn't have to be early in grade 10, but I would say about midway through, they really need to understand the format of their tests and also understand which tests they will want to take, because in between grades 10 and 11, it's important to really get down to some of that preparation. We do our courses in grade 11, so especially if a student is in Reach Ahead Math and taking advanced functions, their studying is supported by that. Otherwise, students are going to be having to do some self-studying in advance because they may need to cover material that they may not have covered in class just yet. But again, I just want to reiterate that there is absolutely no preference for one test over the other. Students often think that the SAT is preferred over the ACT, but that's not the case. Many, many moons ago, the ACT was preferred by schools in Midwest, whereas the SAT was preferred by the East and West Coast schools. There's absolutely no preference at all. And if a student or if an institution says that they are test optional, they do truly mean that. So the timeline for preparing for a US application does mimic a bit the UK preparation in that we really need to focus in on those academics in grade 9 and moving into grade 10, but we also need to be understanding what extracurriculars are going to be amplified in an application. So what is a student already involved in, or what do they wish to become more involved in? And that needs to start in grades 9 and 10. The activities section of the Common Application asks the year or years a student has been involved in that extracurricular. So including an extracurricular in which they were only involved in grade 9, is that really worthy of including? I would say that if you are going to be including things from grade 9, assumedly you will have continued into grade 10 and hopefully grades 11 and 12. So a school really wants to see consistency and commitment in addition to the impact that I had already mentioned. Now, on top of your extracurriculars and your academics, students are needing to begin preparing for an SAT or an ACT and really identifying by the end of grade 10 which of those 2 tests they prefer. Much like the UK, the bulk of our work really does come in grade 11. For our grade 11s, it is one of your challenging years because academically you're taking grade 12 courses. You're also beginning your preparation for university applications. You'll be ending the school year in May because you'll be launching into your professional internship, which, by the way, your professional internship is an amazing component to your application, especially for something like the UK. Being able to talk about working 9 to 5 in a particular area that you are now applying to is quite a wonderful thing to be able to include. For US applications, it's certainly something that I always include in my counselor letter and can be included as one of those activities as well. Grade 11 year, as I said, we really want to be developing that list. What does the fit for institution look like for you? What are you looking for from your social experience and your academic experience? Before we head off for the summer, I help students work through a Google collaborative folder that I share with the students. They are required to work through a very extensive brag sheet in which they get the chance to tell me about themselves. And it also allows them to generate ideas for what they may include in their activity section of the Common App, but also generate some ideas for what they might be talking about in their Common Application as well. Before we leave for the summer, students also need to identify alongside with me the 2 teachers who may write for them. And we want to connect with those teachers to make sure that they do feel like they would be good academic references too. We start drafting essay topics in the summer. I do work through part of the summer. So the expectation is that before students leave for summer holiday, our rising seniors are going to meet with me at the end of June or beginning of July. And then as we come back to school at the end of August, they meet with me again before we start school to see where they're at with their application. The expectation is they will come back from the summer with a draft or 2 of some ideas for essays so that we can really get into the refining of those essays rather than brainstorming starting in September, because November 1st comes very quickly. And it's really important that in September, as a grade 12, they're really getting their feet under them academically, but also potentially in leadership positions or leading clubs and things of that nature too, that they're not overwhelmed adding on all of this additional work with their US. We want to make sure that the bulk of it is sort of already done before they come back from grade 12 or from their summer. Some of our students who are here may be high-level athletes. So we're leading into wrapping up for the evening. If you are an NCAA athlete potentially, then it's important to note that you need to sign into the eligibility center, and we will determine together which of the profiles you will need to complete. Students who are in middle school and are athletes and are thinking that they may matriculate to the US and may play a sport, you can actually create a free profile page account. So that is the first option. Students who are in senior school but do not know what level of play they will be at can also create a free profile page in order to get their eligibility number and to actually start connecting with coaches if they would like. Once you have your eligibility number, I upload your transcript and provide additional information about the school as well as it relates to you, so that coaches, when they are speaking with you, can consider your academics in conjunction with your athletics as well. If you are a senior school student who knows that they want to play Division III, so you have no intentions of going to a bigger school for Division I or Division II, then you would sign up for an amateurism only certification account. However, if you are a very high level athlete, you are in the senior school and you intend to play Division I or Division II athletics, you will sign up for an academic and amateurism certification account. If you're uncertain which division you're going to be playing or which level you'll be playing at, then you will want to complete a free profile page. You can switch your profile over to either the amateurism only or the academic and amateurism certification at any time. But it's not until you actually know which division you're going to be playing in would you move over into that other certification. Conversations with coaches can happen even if you don't know which division you're going to be at. I know for some students, they may be on the cusp of Division I or II and not sure if they're going to be playing Division III. A lot of those conversations happen between families and the student and their coaches. I handle primarily the academic component because no matter how strong of an athlete you are, inevitably you also need to have the academic prowess to allow you to gain entrance admittance into that school. So if you think of the sports component and your athletics as part of your coach's responsibility, often they will also connect you with coaches from institutions you may be looking to visit or have conversations with. I am on the academic side to ensure that eligibility is met and that you are able to gain admittance to the program as far as the academics goes as well. So if you are a middle school student or middle school family who is a high-level athlete and would like to discuss this further, I'm very happy to chat. If you are in grades 9, 10, or 11, and we have not had the chance to have a conversation about NCAA, I'd like to do that before the winter holiday. So please reach out. Generally speaking, I would say that grade 9 is where everything starts, just so that you start to get familiar with the process of what you need to be doing in talking about yourself, creating an athletic resume. That's something that coaches will want to see. But really, a lot of the work starts in grades 10, speaking with the coaches, making sure that your athletic interests are in alignment with your academic alignment interests with me. And then it's in grade 11 that oftentimes, if you're applying Division 1, you will really get serious about a school or two, be attending some of their camps. Usually you may go on an official visit, and that is paid for by the college or university, and you'll usually play with the team. And then in your senior year early on, so usually in about October, early November, you have a national letter of intent. So that's signing day, in which you are signing to with the intention of actually attending a US university. These sorts of things do exist in Canada, just as a note, but on a less official level. You do not need to have an eligibility status. There is no number. Everything goes directly through the university, but there are letters of intent that can be signed before a student is actually admitted to a university, much like in the US. I'm going to move on to direct entry medicine. As I said, there has been an uptick in interest in applying to these types of programs in the UK and Ireland. So I'm going to spend about 5 minutes just talking a bit about that. It's important to note that direct entry medicine does not make it easier. It just means that you are a student who has every intention to become a physician and that you want to study it from day one. So if you are applying to an undergraduate program in Canada, most likely you're going to have a general first year. You may not have specializations until your third and fourth year, even if you're studying in health sciences or medical sciences here in Ontario. And then once you're done your undergraduate degree, assuming that you've been accepted to a medical program here in Canada as well, you have additional 4 years, plus you have 2 years of your residency. What direct entry medicine does is it shortens the amount of time that you're actually studying because you do not have those general years. So students who are looking to matriculate to direct entry medicine have 6 years of study. In some cases, 3 of those may be considered an undergraduate and 3 may be a medical degree. Many of them, however, are 6 years combined. And so therefore you start in your first year and you end in your 6th year. Some may allow you to matriculate from one institution after 3 years after an undergraduate and then going into medical school. Generally speaking, as I said, it's 6 years, and then you still need to do 2 years of residency, whether that is coming back to North America or staying in the UK. It's dependent on where you're placed or if you are placed and successful in that placement. But your 6 years, you spend 2 years less. And the reason for that is that in your first year, you are really diving into systems and the human body. You are having the opportunity to wear your white coat and wear a stethoscope and be working on cadavers in your first year of university. It's quite different here in Canada, where you're again studying quite a bit more of a general undergraduate degree. You can study any undergraduate degree after high school and then apply to medical school. It's just most common that students are applying to Bachelor of Science and then applying to medical school. But in the UK or in Ireland, you really are stepping into the shoes of a physician in day one. Students who are applying to the UK will do so via UCAS. So that's the same application that I was speaking of earlier, but students can only apply to 4 undergraduate medical programs. There are many more medical programs, but students can only select those 4. There is an October 15th deadline, and it's important to note that all of these programs are 6 years in length. Just like the UCAS account or application, there's going to be your academic profile. Important to note that most commonly students will have to write a UCAT. That is a standardized test that students will write at some point in the summer before they come back to grade 12. So that is done and out of the way before they're actually working on their UK application. There will be a personal statement. They will be looking for things like patient care in your personal statement, opportunities in which you've extended your learning outside of the school. So I often talk about summer programs, both in between grades 10 and 11 and 11 and 12, as really quite critical for that personal statement in developing your direct entry medical programming application. There's also the counselor reference. Again, this would be me talking about your suitability for the course of study. So it's really important that your maths and sciences, your scores, especially in biology, chemistry, functions, advanced functions in grades 11 and 12, those become really quite important for those applications. Important to note is pretty much all UK direct entry medicine programs do require the UCAT, and you can only write it once. So there's not multiple sits for that. You can only write it once. Ireland, on the other hand, does not require standardized testing. A very similar application that they are looking for a personal statement. However, it's a little bit longer. They're also allowing students to submit teacher letters of recommendation and an external recommender as well. Usually I'm not submitting my counselor letter to Ireland because usually we're submitting a teacher letter as well as quite often the co-op supervisor for the student's professional internship. So a student in their professional internship may have the opportunity to work in a clinic and be able to shadow a doctor or shadowing a dentist or shadowing a vet as well. Oftentimes those supervisors who are arranged with the school as part of the student's co-op will write letters of recommendation in support of the student's application. The most common schools to which students are applying in Ireland, Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. We also have Royal College of Surgeons in Bahrain, and then UCD, so University College Dublin and Galway. All of these are 6-year programs, while Ireland does have a 5-year option. I do not recommend that students seek this out. You are going directly into medical school from high school, and really that one additional year gives you the landing point after high school to really dive into deep university level study rather than going directly into medical school. As I said, that there is an academic profile that's a part of that. That includes the student's entire transcript and any completed APs, should that be a part of your application, a personal statement, and then 2 letters of recommendation as well. One of those comes from a teacher. I will make a quick note about APs. Students can submit APs as a part of their application for the UK, for Ireland, as well as for the US. But I just want to note that unlike Oxbridge, so Oxford and Cambridge do have a heavy emphasis on APs, but very specifically in the grade 11 and 12 years. APs for US, Ireland, and UK play a very small role. However, most important is that students are taking APs when they're available in their grade 12 year. What this does is it shows that the student is rising to the challenge and willing to amplify the rigor of their program. Schools in the US and in the UK understand that AP courses do not start at SMLS until grade 12. In fact, most schools do not offer APs, at least in Canada. Most schools do not offer APs earlier than grade 12 because it is university level material that a student is studying. So for a student to be able to study an AP curriculum, they really need to have a good grasp, or they're studying it in conjunction in the grade 12 curriculum as well. So for a student who is intending to take an AP as a grade 9 or a 10 and self-study, most likely they're needing to wrap their heads around the grade 12 level curriculum as well, because the AP is a university level exam, which is evaluating university level material as well. So this is the timeline for our direct entry medicine. I have touched upon most of it, so I will be wrapping up here. Just as a note, all of these slides will be made available along with a recording of this presentation, so you will be able to review them a little more closely as well if you have any questions. That's where we'll be wrapping up tonight. Thank you very much for joining me. I look forward to having conversations with our senior school students about their pathway planning, what excites them, what they're interested in, and what they want to explore. And for our middle school families, if you have any questions about course selection as it may be relating to your daughter in grade 6, 7, or 8, or if you have any questions generally about the application process after our presentation tonight, I welcome you to send me an email and ask any questions. I'm very happy to sit down and meet with you one-on-one as well. I'm currently wrapping up a lot of our applications with our grade 12s right now. November 1st was quite busy. We have some deadlines coming up for our domestic applications as well, but our grade 11s will start to become my priority over the next few weeks. If you are a grade 11 student who has not yet met with me this year, and you are intending to apply internationally, we need to meet over the next 2 to 3 weeks, especially before the winter holiday, so that we can start planning out not just your course selection, but also to see where you're at and where you need to go. Again, thank you so much for joining me tonight, and have a great evening.